welcome back to another episode of the Truth and Transparency Podcast with your host, Brother X, and
the culture scientist. Woo, woo.
so I found the Coach of Scientist. She's back from battling the king crabs up in Alaska. So, Coach of Scientist, how was your battles with the king crabs?
What you're talking about? These reasons that you give are so fascinating sometimes.
Well, I mean, I have to give a reason because sometimes you be going on adventures, man. You and your frat friend.
Well, the adventure was not an adventure. It was my last day at my part-time, which I was very excited to be done with.
Oh, so that's what it was. Okay.
Yes.
They gave me a whole different reason, but that's beside the point.
Who gave you a whole different reason?
That's not important. I have top men keeping track of you. All right, but here on the Truth and Transparency Podcast, we talk openly and honestly about everything in between, why people can't get right in 2024. But listeners, before we go any further, we want to make sure we shout out to Mr. Smith and Teacher Bay. They just had their anniversary on Monday, so that's why they are not with us on at their time of this recording. But yeah, we just want to shout out them, shout out to their love and their anniversaries and all that Black love stuff. And we look forward to celebrating with you guys. And that swim out sweet. But listen, if you're trying to help us out on this trip, we are always accepting donations,
Money, money, money.
funds,
Dollar, dollar, dollar bills, yo.
paying bills,
We need cheddar.
moolah,
Coins.
ducats, doubloons, Susan B. Anthony's. All right, but yes, yeah, so it's just the two of us today, listeners. This is just part two, like I said in the previous episode of our conversation about DreamvilleFest to be more specific. And we're going to get into that in just a moment, but I first want to take some time to do our mental health check. So, Coach of Scientist, how have you been mentally? I know you mentioned about one thing that I think is probably has your mental in a good space.
It does. It also has me thinking about moving forward. And for a while, I go through cycles where I'm really good and then really bad and then really good and then really bad on most things, depending on what it is. But there's one thing just in general that I've been wanting to do better on. And it's just me being a better version of myself and whatever that means. So it's been heavy on my brain. It's always been heavy on my brain. And I'm hoping that now that it's this super heavy, I can just push forward. And I needed a change. So the change I decided to do was change up the part-time because I needed a break from that. And yeah, so hopefully moving forward, mentally it'll be fine. Other than like the positive attitudes toward life and stuff, it was a very sad week for me because it was my brother's officially his 50th birthday last week. And then he also unfortunately lost his battle to PTSD. He was a Marine Semper Fi. Um, and he lost his battle to PTSD and he took his life last year. So it was within a week of the same time. So it was really a lot to process within a week's time span. So other than that weighing on me, in addition, I think I've been overall pretty well with how I've been handling things. But yeah. And besides me having to like, snap on some things that should just be logical sense, that is not logical sense.
We'll come back to another day once you've had more time to work on that piece. But I know what you mean. For me,
We're talking about that parking.
I wasn't going to talk about it, but yes, we will come back to that another time. We got other fish to fry. So I would say for me mentally, I'm in a pretty good space. I know I mentioned in the previous episode that I'm spending some time with family this week. I do feel more comfortable sharing now because by the time that you are hearing this, it will have already passed. But my condolences to my cousin Cherie. Um, she's been on the podcast. She's talked about Hampton and about Dreamville Fest last year. She was part of it, and unfortunately, her father, very similar to my own, he unfortunately passed on from his battle with prostate cancer. So currently, my mother is up in New York with our family, getting ready for the wake and funeral. So, listeners, if you follow my cousin on social media, or you know my cousin through the podcast, please send her your love and support, as well as my family. I'm doing good. My mother, very strong, even though it's hard not to go down the route. She told me not to spiral when I first found out about things. It is unfortunate that it happened right as Dreamville Fest was going on, or right before Dreamville Fest. So it made it a challenge to kind of the high or like the joy and like the anticipation that I had for the Dreamville Fest kind of weighing down some. And then unfortunately, obviously, Shree couldn't make it down this year, even though she had planned on being here. But obviously, family is more important. So we just continue to give her our thoughts and prayers and continue to support it. And this is just my PSA. I haven't said it in a while, but men, when you are of age or even before then, please start continuing to get checked for prostate cancer, get your prostate checked, as well as continue to make sure you take your health seriously. It is not okay to be super strong and think, oh, well, I don't feel anything wrong, so that must mean everything's okay. That is not the case.
And please take care of your mental. If you are thinking suicidal thoughts, please seek help.
Um,
You are
if
loved.
if we remember at the end of this podcast, we'll talk to Mrs. Smith about it, see if we can put that information in the show notes for this week's episode as well. But yeah, on to, I guess, more positive things. So we were originally planning to have a little roundtable discussion about with our third amigo and our Dreamville X festivities, but life be happening. So I mean, we love her, and hopefully Nurse Joy will be able to join us another day. All right, so we're actually going to go ahead and get into Dreamville Fest itself. So we myself being a four-time returning person, my wife, the culture scientist, being her third time going to the event, we become veterans in the sense of the festival. We've kind of gotten a decent idea of what the layout was and planning and everything. So let's kind of go day by day. Well, actually, matter of fact, I think what would be cool is kind of talk about the lead up to it because I think we had some cool experiences before the actual festival. So, listeners, one of the big things that is really dope about Dreamville Fest, if you've never been, is that the fashion and the vibes you kind of get from everybody's style and fashion that they wear to the event, I think is almost like its own personality of the event as well as just going to the event. Wouldn't you say?
I agree. I got my life when we got dropped off in that long line, um, before the gates were open. Then I was walking past and somebody was like, "That's what I'm looking for. That's what I'm talking about." And they were talking about me, guys. I was like, "Oh, what? Thank you." Um, but yes, I truly enjoy seeing the creativity and the attire and the outfits that people come up with. It is a lot of fun. Um, Shout out to
See Sassy Designs.
Sassy Designs
Hmm.
for making our attire on Sunday wonderful.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Well, no,
or
Saturday
adding,
too.
well, yeah, Saturday too for you,
Yeah.
yeah, for adding a little extra oomph to our gear,
I guess that
essentially.
I guess that is our pseudo Black business highlight. See Sassy Designs. The reason why I wanted to make sure we took time to talk about it because it was really a dope experience because this is the first time we really did custom gear for the festival. In past years, either I bought something at the pop-up shop for myself and the culture scientists, or I've ordered it online and we've worn it at a future festival. But this was like the first year we really took time to kind of do custom pieces. And they have this really dope DIY event with different apparel where you kind of learn about how to kind of do press for like, I don't know if the term is vinyls. Are those considered vinyls or just decals for
It's
the
more like decals,
yeah, I would say decals and iron on not stickers, but
screens.
yeah, screen prints. I guess that's probably a good way of putting it for different things. And we have a couple different pieces. So if you follow us on our social media, you've probably seen her custom pieces as well as some of mine. One of my favorite piece from the weekend is probably my blue tie-dye crew neck sweater that I did for the first day. It was really dope because I was able to take a concept that I kind of equate with Dreamville Fest in my lock journey, which I actually just hit 5 years after the time of this recording. But basically, I kind of started both my lock journey and my, as some people would say, my evolution into looking like J. Cole by able to encompass it with a really dope image on the back of my my sweater.
And what makes me happy is that he chose that picture. They did not have that picture. He chose
And
that
if
picture.
anybody tells you otherwise, they came up with that idea, it was
And
mine.
after that, everybody wanted that picture. So it was really cool. Although granted, yes, somebody else could have came in and came up with it. But I don't think that would have occurred. He decided this is what I want. He designed his own. He selected that picture, and from then everybody else wanted it. So shout out to Brother X.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I think one other piece about the design that I wanted to talk about was I had went in earlier that week and had a really dope conversation with the owners, like really dope people. Really love what they're doing. If you're in the Triangle area, definitely check them out. We will definitely put their information in the show notes. Um, but I will say that Friday, when I was able to take the culture sciences after she got off work to come into the actual place for their follow-up DIY event, because it wasn't just Wednesday. It was like basic carry through the weekend until the event was over. That we got to meet some really dope people that we were able to help create and design and flex our artistic muscles
Can't help myself. If I see something artistic, I'm like, oh, can I assist? Can I try? Can I do it?
because it all bore out of the oh, you know what you're doing. Because when I went on Wednesday, listeners, it was just me because it was pretty slow at the time that I went. So I designed my pieces. So I had an understanding of how to use the equipment because part of the DIY experience wasn't just that, oh, you picked out these things and then they do it for you. No, you actually learn how to actually do it yourself and create custom pieces. So when I came in there on Friday, and I was talking to people, they recognized me, which was really dope. And I recognized the image that I picked for my apparel. That they was like, oh yeah, you know what to do. You can go ahead and do your stuff. I'm like, I do know what I can do with this stuff. Okay. So I started doing my stuff, and then other people started. I don't know if they asked or
It
we
was a
off.
mix.
It was a mixture of stuff where we help people. So we were probably
They
going
were
to be
like, oh, they know what they're doing. And then they kind of asked, but we were already talking to those ones outside of
right.
it.
So once that happened, we spent probably another hour, hour and a half and some change, not only working our pieces, but helping a couple people create their pieces, which was really dope to see. Because I know for sure we kicked it with one of the people for a little bit on Saturday,
Yep.
but then on Sunday, I think you had went to go get food. I think I saw the other chick who had that white hoodie that we helped create.
Well, you also, when we walked in, somebody remembered my name and they were like, hey, and I was like, hey. And then it took me like 5 minutes later, then I realized who they were.
Yeah. That's a very beautiful thing about Dreamville Fest. That is like it's always positive vibes regardless of the situation.
About
Yes.
positive vibes, what I enjoyed about was I learned about a lot of people who still went solo dolo.
Oh yeah.
And a lot of them I knew at least four people who were going by themselves. So one of the young ladies that we met up at the shop, she was actually going by herself. So if anybody knows me, as I like to call it, I collect people, even if it's for a short term.
Yeah,
That sounds funny,
that
but
sounds like the wonderful people.
yeah, no. Essentially, I make friends wherever I go. And I always invite people if they don't have anybody else to hang out with us, for a little while. Um, what I thought was really cool is I was looking at their pictures over the time, and you could see like, oh, although this was a solo trip, all of a sudden they linked up with other solo dolo people, and it was really nice to see
Mhm.
like a community that is being formed.
Oh yeah. And I think listening to the people at the DIY spot, just hearing how far away they travel, like I think it was like I know that Dreamville Fest does a great job of like putting out how many like states and like even countries that people come from to come for the festival, which is still crazy when you think about it just for like Raleigh. Because yeah, Raleigh is a big city here in North Carolina, but when you try to think of it in comparison to some other places, you're like, oh, so it's bigger than I really thought. So they came from like there was this one couple I think they came from Kentucky, I think it was either to Kentucky or
From
Ohio.
London.
Yeah, and we got people coming out of state, and it was just really just dope
Out of the
vibes.
country.
Yes, out of the country. I'm sorry. So that was leading up to it. We did go to a nice little not pop up, but it was like that music event on Thursday.
It was a pop-up music. It's not it wasn't I was about to say DIY.
Right. That's I tried not to at first.
It was a pop-up I wish I had it in front of me still. But basically people open mic night,
Yes.
basically.
I
That's
would
what
say
it
that. Yeah,
was.
that's probably an accurate way of putting it. So that was really dope to kind of go out there for a
So
few
you were a
hours.
performer, they wanted you to come up. It was really nice.
Oh yeah.
This was my first year. I've never been really to any of the pop-up shops in general or participated in
And none of the
any
main events, yeah.
of the events. So it was just really nice to be able to have the mental capacity to just
And the
do
time, yeah.
in the time to just be able to do stuff.
Yeah, so it was just one of those things that we were very excited about and got to do, and I think it definitely enhanced our experience, and it's definitely something we'll look into in the future. Because I remember our first year, even back when it was just Dreamville Festival was one day on a Saturday, and we just knew that us and cousin Simba and Nurse Joy, we had tickets to this. I think the event was nothing but anthems event
Yeah, we
in
did.
Raleigh. It was literally one of the things like, oh yeah, well after J. Cole perform, we're gonna go there. Yeah, nah, that we were out like a light.
Out like a light,
Yes.
like a light.
So,
Especially because you gotta the first year that traffic, boy.
oh yeah, that was one thing. But we'll get into like the overall experience of year four in just a moment. But yeah, so that kind of lays the framework to the event. So you kind of heard me allude to it, but Nurse Joy joined us this year after I guess this was her first year back after the initial year. So it was really cool kind of see through her perspective how things had changed and her thoughts and opinions on it, which was really dope. But yeah, so we did a lot of the same routine, which I would say transportation with the shuttles, transportation has gotten tremendously better from the first year where they didn't have their own shuttles for the event and people had to try to get Ubers and it was just like beyond congested trying to do that. And I think two pieces, even though it's expensive for the parking deck, but I think that what they've done to kind of help facilitate some of the issues with transportation has given it an improvement. So if I were to give it a scale from like 1 to 5, I would say probably it was probably at a like a 3.5, 4 overall for the weekend. I know that there's a piece that we might get to later that brought the score down just a little bit.
I mean, traffic only got bad because when you're around the general area of the place,
Hmm.
for real, if you didn't know what was going on and paid attention to the school buses that were at the park,
Right.
you wouldn't know that anything was going on in downtown Durham. I mean, Raleigh,
Unless
unless you
you
knew it was.
really were.
And there was a lot, there was multiple things occurring in the city that weekend. So, like, it was fascinating to see how busy we were as a city.
Right.
It wasn't as bad as it could have been.
Very true, yeah. Especially with like I think a big part of it, I think you were alluding to was that NC State, both men and women's team were playing in the Final Four. So obviously, since NC State is based in Raleigh, the town's going to be bumping whether it's like watch parties or people trying to celebrate if the teams won. So it could have gone a bunch of different ways. So we ended up taking the shuttle both days, which I think that is our go-to form of transportation because
Unless we can get closer and take our own cars.
unless we are staying with somebody closer in the city. But I mean, it has its own like ups and downs with that, but that's neither here nor there. So once we got onto the shuttle, which was pretty smooth, we rode to the event. When we got there, the first thing that was off, I won't say off-putting, but it was like it was noticeable was the fact that we tried to get there super like right as gates opened on
Saturday.
Saturday, and we were riding the bus. It was like, oh, okay. So in my mind, like usually they'll park because like they'll stop right at the current corner where we just have to start walking to the event. Yeah, no, that didn't happen solely because apparently when we try to get there early, yeah, the gates hadn't opened yet, and people were just lined up on the sidewalk leading to the area where you start to walk up to the gates.
But I still don't understand why they had that blocked off the way they had it blocked off when people could have just kept walking. Like they had this like you know how people hold the line at a club?
Mhm.
That's what it looked like to me. Like at the
Well,
corner.
I think with the timing of when we got there, and then because remember how many people they said were at the event. I was not I wouldn't have been surprised if people were all we lined up all the way to the actual gate
I mean, it didn't look like it when we were walking, but you know, it's possible.
because by the time we
Because
got
the way it was spread out, that's
yeah,
why.
I think so. So basically, we got there and we had to kind of they stopped us at that corner, but then we had to walk back to a certain spot, which
That's when I got my compliment. Whoop, whoop.
so I mean, it was not off-putting, maybe slightly annoying, but it wasn't like a big deal because we were so early in the day and it wasn't like we were missing any performances at the moment.
I think what was off-putting was the fact that the bus was passing the long line of people when they could have dropped us off at the end of the line, and then what you had to do was walk past all those people in line. So like I get,
I
but it
mean,
is what it is.
yeah, I think maybe it's just one of those things where they may have not known ahead of time like that's what the deal was when that bus got the person was driving when they got there. So it's kind of like one of those they learned from it. I mean, I think one of the things about Dreamville Fest is that they learn each year from previous mistakes because we didn't have that issue on Sunday, but we also came a little bit later in the day. So I mean, it's trades off. So we're walking up there, we're vibing, having a good time. We're kind of seeing all the people, all the attire. We're looking at one of the big things about Dreamville Fest is like all like the fixtures or objects to take pictures with, which was really dope to see. They had this really nice water tower that we saw, but it really kind of popped that evening when we left on Saturday. But getting there and waiting in line, it wasn't bad. And going through like security, it really had gotten a lot more efficient. And a lot of things that I saw leading up to it were like people were concerned about security. Are people going to go through my stuff? And they're trying to get certain things. In all actuality, if you weren't dumb and certain like pretty much like super obvious about your stuff, you don't really have to worry about it that much.
I mean, because them brushes I saw were not just brushes.
Oh yeah, no. There was a lot of people who had you know what, I'm not gonna give away trade secrets.
And
And
that's all I
I'm
said.
about to
That's
say,
all I
I'm about to say,
said.
oh no, I'm saying if you know, you know. So once we got into the festival, it was really dope to see because I think we got in right as T.I. Son's The Money was performing. So we took some time, obviously, since we have been standing in line for a hot minute, to check out the General Plus area, which if you are a first time goer, and you are not bougie, but you
Don't
want
like people
and you need a little bit of space,
in a better bathroom.
yes, I would highly recommend the General Plus. Pay the little extra to go with General Plus because you have your own separate drinks, food, and other stuff like that. So I would say definitely check that out. If I were to scale what's most bang for your buck, I would definitely say General Plus because I think from our experience from other people, they haven't they haven't really like boasted great about like the JV, varsity, and
I've heard
VIP.
decent this year. I've heard decent things.
Okay, yeah.
Hmm.
What were some of the stuff they said?
I mean, they just said you get to be able to get closer, and you have more space to sit down, and just more variety of options.
Okay. So if you have the money, then kind of check it out. I think one of the interesting things they did was that they set up MVP suites, which was just like another add-on to if you were in like groups of people who had like I think it was at least varsity or MVP status for your tickets where you had like these you have sections. So I mean, it works like especially in the evenings when it's getting cold or you're around like a whole bunch of other people. But I think one of the things that I've always found interesting is that because there's two stages for Dreamville Fest, the transition is a big part of both what you decide or what artists you decide to watch, but also how you position yourself throughout the day, you know?
Yeah, comfort. I don't. I like people, but I don't. Like I have a. I like crowd. I don't like to be in a crowd. I like space. I like for stuff to make sense. So, unfortunately, Brother X often had like we try to make sure we're not up on people and things like that. But yes, I agree. It definitely depending on the two stages depends on what you want to do, what you want to see, how much you want to walk around. And that's why you have to pick. Us as pros, we know the first day really try to just see everything first. And
Mm,
then the second day, I like to relax and chill out
yeah.
as much as possible, depending on who the artist is. I still like to get there earlier in the day. And it's mainly, if I'm being honest, because we spent money.
Yeah.
Like, I don't see the purpose getting there for me. I know 4 in the afternoon if we paid
Mm,
a certain amount of money for 2 days. Like,
exactly. Like you
there's a
want to get
reason
your
why
bang
I
for your buck.
paid. So
Yeah.
that's just me.
And to the point you were talking about, kind of like seeing the surveying everything, Saturday was a big part of like kind of checking stuff out. So once we had gone through General Plus and had gotten the chance to kind of get our bearings, use the bathroom, and kind of figure out things, we actually then Um,
Did the Ferris wheel.
Definitely did the Ferris wheel, which was really dope for the first time in 4 years that we actually did the Ferris wheel. The line wasn't too long, but
That's because we went straight there.
yeah. So did we go straight there? Because I thought we
We
checked some.
we went to GA Plus,
Okay.
and then we went from GA Plus to the Ferris wheel.
Okay. Yeah. So basically, we kind of went from there. And then after the Ferris wheel, which was really dope because we actually got to get some really cool shots and videos from being on the top at the top of the Ferris wheel. Did we do food next or did we do the Charmin thing next?
You did the Sherman thing, and then we did food.
Okay, so with this Charmin thing, it was one of the things where listeners, you have like at this point, it's become very much a big vendor thing. People kind of come out and just, it's very much an
We've
experience.
gotten sponsors.
Like a lot of sponsors that kind of help facilitate a lot of what's going on. So, well, I will say with the Charmin thing, which is really dope, was that they had a setup where they not only had a trailer where it was another restroom area because obviously, listeners, we don't know what Charmin is. It's a toilet paper company.
They definitely were offering people a nice porta
So,
potty.
yeah. So with that, had this really they had this golden toilet. And listeners, I had to be a ignorant black folk person.
But you didn't post it the way you wanted to.
I don't know. I still have I just haven't posted it quite yet. But that's beside the point. So, of course, listeners, there's a big mascot of the Charmin Bear, and I got a picture with him as well as the golden toilet. And if you see a picture saying that I'm the shit, just know that yes, that is from what it's from. So, beyond that, I think we end up getting food. We finally started to
Stop, shout out to Chubba Chubba.
churba churba.
It's my favorite food truck sometimes.
So,
Oftentimes, actually, when they come out, every time I see them, I'm like, oh, let me get some Chubba Chubba.
yeah. So I mean, if you're trying to sponsor us, we always taking donations.
Food.
Yes, yes, food.
Dumplings.
Multiple dumplings. Variety. Um, but yeah, so after we got off, we went back to the General Plus area where we actually met some really dope folks who we were talking to as well. I
Nurse
don't
Joy
really,
got some Jamaican food truck.
yeah, Jamaican
I
food.
still vote the food trucks are still the better options of the food to get.
I would say, yeah, if we're trying to give you like some etiquette or some tips, it may cost a little bit more, but definitely check out all the food trucks that are there. And yes, you need to eat before you get to the festival because they are high price for just about everything. But the food trucks still are going to give you probably your best bang for buck because a lot of the stuff that I won't say generic, but the common food options, they're cooking for bulk
It's
versus
alright.
taste. I mean, it gets the job done, but it's not anything to write home about.
For other people, so like other people I heard, so like the stuff I got, it wasn't gross. It was alright. It was like, okay, I like this, but nah, it's not really what I was wanting. And I also didn't hear that much great things about those. But as far as the food trucks, I heard great things about the food trucks.
Yeah. So after that, we were kicking it, and then we kind of like took some pictures at different venues. Like shout out to Febreze was there. They had a really dope photo booth area, as well as Hennessy had another one. I'm trying to remember all of them. Oh, and shout out to the artists who did stuff on the at the East entrance. They had a really dope tarot card picture of like all the Dreamville artists as well as some other ones. There's a really dope anime one that I gotta take a picture of in front of on Sunday, which is really cool. But all in all, it was just really cool. And then I think after a while we started to kind of get in position where we were going to kick it. Shout out to Orange 4. We had to go back to it on Saturday. But then we just decided to pick some artists because listen, for those who don't know, Saturday was an interesting mix of artists. I think from the artists that I remember that we actually saw, I for sure saw Earth Gang, um, saw Sexy Red, I saw Lil Yachty and Jid, but I saw 50 Cent. I didn't go see Schoolboy Q because I feel like did you go?
You went and saw Schoolboy Q because, or we didn't. I wanted to see Schoolboy Q, and we didn't go see Schoolboy Q for whatever reason. I missed Schoolboy Q.
Okay.
We all went and sat down to watch somebody on the other stage. I don't remember who it was.
Yeah. I think it was Earth Gang because I think right around that time. But all the same, Earth Gang did a phenomenal job, and the artists that we did get to listen to were pretty dope. Shout out to some of the lesser known artists. Amire was really dope. I recognize her from some of her songs on like TikTok and social media. Lute is always a great artist. But I will say the first artist that really like kind of got my attention was Sexy Red. So listeners, I have my thoughts about Sexy Red as a artist and as a personality in general, but I will say for the type of music that she makes, she does put on a very interesting show. Coach Scientist, did you have any thoughts about that?
Listen, I have lots and lots of thoughts and opinions about her in general. However, listen, she a vibe, okay? I got my entire life with her. Like I knew, and I like don't I know her music, okay? I don't know all her songs, but I know her. I knew like her hits. So she did a really good job, and she had her fans up there. And I feel like for what she's staying true to who she is. And the only thing I might wonder about is when your children get older, that type of stuff, but I'm officially at that age where I think about that stuff.
Hmm.
So she's not like she's right now living it up.
Hmm.
She's talking about what she knows and you know, get it sexy, get it sexy. Uh,
It was
uh,
interesting
uh.
because I never actually like sat through and listened to a lot of her songs. Like I'm familiar, but I was like, oh, interesting. So I mean, it was definitely a vibe. I would say Jid did his thing phenomenally, like he always does. Performed a snippet of a new song at the beginning of his set, but also performed a lot of his hits. And listeners, if you haven't got on the wave with Jid yet, in my mind, he's like one of the top next generation artists right now. I'm not biased because he used to go to Hampton and all this stuff. I genuinely feel like he is an artist that is on the rise, both within the hip hop community, but also just as an artist overall. His ability to kind of go across genre has been phenomenal. Um, I will say that we went to go watch did we all three of us go watch 50 Cent? Yeah. So when as the night went on and we kind of were here chilling and listened to some of the artists, when it came to the last two artists of the night, which were 50 Cent and SZA, 50 Cent, we actually went there and he obviously we're a generation that knew him when he first came out, but you people there was a lot of talk about 50 when he ended up replacing Chris Brown for uh for the one of the Saturday night headliners. Um but I think he definitely did his thing. I knew he would, but there was just a lot of talk around it because people were very like in their feelings about it, which I mean, for those who felt that way, I get it. I know I personally wasn't that really pressed to see Chris Brown. I knew he would put on performance, but I also was fine for December because again, my motto is if J. Cole gonna be at Dreamville Fest, I'm gonna be there and I'm gonna have a good time. So with his performance, he did a lot of his older songs, obviously. But one thing I thought was really dope that he did, which Dreamville has started to become known for this, is that he brought out the baby. So the whole tradition of kind of like bringing out other artists during their sets was like a big part of Dreamville Fest. So the baby performed really well, which is like a really nice surprise. Which shout out to Nurse Joy for bringing it to my attention, which was like for him to be from Charlotte. This was actually his first. Was it his first time? I think he was his first time actually performing at Dreamville Fest, which you would think North Carolina artists would be there more often, but stars just never aligned. So now he performed. He performed on Saturday, which was really dope. So yes, you have something else, Coach Sanchez?
I was just gonna talk about 50.
Yeah, go ahead.
As far as the lineup goes, it pers we can come back to the lineup. As far as 50 goes replacing Chris Brown, I was not upset all in all about Chris Brown being replaced by 50. I was upset that 50 was a replacement for an R&B singer. That was really, it wasn't equivalent. And that was what I was more upset about. As far as his performance goes, you can definitely see 50's age. And I thought it was a great performance, minus his what felt like a 5 minute um lap dance that we didn't need to watch. That's my only other opinion about his performance. He did what most people do back in the from the time that, we were growing up.
Mhm.
They did a lot of outfit changes.
Yes, very much
He
so.
had a lot of outfit changes. That's when I say his age was showing.
Hmm.
But I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Again, minus the whole I was confused by like, so we're just gonna watch him get a lap dance right now? Okay.
I feel like it probably has been from the tour that he's on. He might have just did a show, and that was part of it. That might have been part of the show. Who
That's
knows?
fine.
Because I think it had to do with it was correlating with the song he had just played, I think. But
It did. It just didn't correlate across a field.
it didn't translate at the festival. Yeah, which I get. So by that point, I'm gonna be honest with you, listeners, we were tired. So we made a group decision that as much as we can appreciate SZA, we actually
Left.
left early so that we kind of got ahead of like the rush. So we didn't actually see SZA, but from what I saw and from what I heard, she did a phenomenal performance. Um, but yeah, so that was day one, which I would say overall experience and everything. I think I would give it I would say a 3.5 out of 5. I think that with some like there was definitely a lot less artists that I was pressed about seeing. Like there were some artists that I know I personally wanted to see, and that I enjoyed, but it wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh my goodness, I felt super mad that I missed somebody on Saturday.
I feel like this year was more, let's actually explore versus we have to see this person. So as far as the lineup goes in that sense of the matter, I'm not that upset. I was like, oh great, I get to actually explore this time. Versus I need to listen to this person.
Hmm. So we get home at a decent time, which listeners, make sure you hydrate and get and like rehydrate when you get home because it's one of those things that we were out there all day. And although we were hydrating throughout, it was still one of the things where we were definitely like sore and tired and definitely needed time to kind of sleep and recover, which kind of leads us to Sunday, which Sunday was different just because we decided to go a little bit later in the day. We were talking about all the artists who were performing and who we actually wanted to see. And probably outside of Boz, there wasn't anybody in like the earlier acts that opened up that we wanted to see immediately. So with that being said, we went later in the day, which to a degree helped with us getting through the lines. It was still a little bit busy because one of the big things that J. Cole talked about at the during his set and we realized was there was a lot of people. Like normally at a festival, you kind of feel it. And in previous years, like yeah, it was a lot of people, but you didn't necessarily feel it as much, at least not to me.
I didn't feel it this year. I felt it was more people last year. That's what I felt.
Well, for me, and for what J. Cole has said, he said originally there was supposed to be like 50,000 people um per day or per like during the event, and he was able to get 52. So that ended up being close to because I think it was sold out. There was like over 104,000 people combined from both days at the festival, which I think is bigger than previous years to a degree, just because of like the amount they were allowed to sell, which I think was a big part. Because normally in the past, once tickets sold out, they were sold out, and people were just left on their own to try to figure it out. So from there, we actually got there and we made in time. I think Nurse Joy ended up joining us a little bit later after we had gotten there. So we were just vibing. Boz is always like I think I explained it on the Chaotic Culture podcast episode where I said um that Boz's music always feels like he's on a vacation somewhere and he's just there for the vibes. Like he played our favorite song of his, which was Tribe, which we played for our wedding, which is really dope. Got some really funny and cool videos with Coach Scientist dancing to his music. Um, but besides that, I think there's a couple other people we wanted to see. I stayed and watched Ray Strimmer. Um, while I think you and Nurse Joy ended up going to watch Monica a little bit later.
Yep.
So while that was happening, this is really dope, and I want to say shout out to Monster Energy. They were the MVP that kept the vibes going in between sets because you could tell that in between performances and they needed music, they had a DJ going who he was doing his damn thing. I'm not even gonna lie. I don't quite remember his name, but he did a phenomenal job. And one thing about the monster truck that I found interesting, I failed to mention this the first night
About Monster
about the Monster energy drink truck.
truck.
Yes, there was a truck.
I didn't see a truck. I just kept seeing Monster drink.
Yeah, there was a truck that where they the whole point was that they had these big balloons and items that they kind of helped with the decorations. So the first night it was like, oh, okay, cool. They're about to shut down. And then they decided they started tossing some of those balloons and those fixtures out to the crowd. Obviously, it was just big balloons. So, like in crowds, you kind of see like a beach ball being passed around and whatnot. It literally just kind of carried over and it was just kind of travel around. It was really cool, dope to see. They actually did it again the second night, but they had more items. So I think they realized, oh, this is kind of cool. This kind of get his image out there. It's kind of add to like the whole atmosphere. So yeah, shout out to Monster Energy Drink.
Maybe it was their plan all along.
It's very possible. So from there, I would say Jeezy was another performance that I went to go see with Nurse Joy while the culture scientists chill for a little bit. One thing I will
Because
say,
there was only three of us, and we did not want to lose our spot. So one of us had to make the sacrifice.
yes. So one of the things that I will say about Sunday that didn't happen on Saturday that much was that there were some sound issues. I noticed that with a couple of different performances. One of the biggest ones was for one of the not headliners, but one of the bigger acts from a global standpoint. Artist by the name of Rima. Listeners, you may or may not know who they are, but they have a couple of hits. I can't recall them. I'm not as familiar with them, but I recognized the song like from the beat and the melody. So he was trying to perform, and a big part of these type of performances, especially even with concerts, that they have earpieces in that will play the music for them. Because if they went based off the music from that's playing out to the fans, their timing could be off and they'll be desynced. Because a lot of times these people aren't always fully singing or performing live. They may be like performing bits and pieces, but there's sometimes the song is music is played for the audience to be able to keep up and know what part of the song that the artist is on. Wouldn't you say?
Hmm.
So from there, he started to say that he was having issue with his earpiece, like his music's not playing in his earpiece, so he can't keep up with it. So the first time you kind of catch it like, oh, that's unfortunate. Hopefully they kind of get it together. And that's typically what's been the case for DreamvilleFest. They usually get it together. They've done a pretty decent job with music. Um, but it kept happening, and you could tell like he's a young artist. I think he was like 22 years old. He kept getting frustrated with the music.
Personally, I think he handled it badly. I mean, he has every right to. It's his music, and I would have been pissed too. But
I mean, what do you mean? Well, explain further what do you mean by like he ended up Portland?
I feel like at one point he had like a little miniature fit on the stage. Granted, again, I get that he couldn't hear, and I get that it was the misconnect, but when he snapped on the stage a little bit, and like he was just like, "Oh, this like I can't hear." And granted, again, I understand why and what he wanted, but for me, I was just like, "Okay, we can, like I understand where you're coming from." But him complaining loudly on the microphone, you can't hear, but we can hear everything you're saying.
Well, I mean, I think to play devil's advocate to a degree, I would say that do you think that him not being as well known of an artist, do you think that played a role in how we might have reacted to him being upset?
No, for me, I would have responded the same way if Jeezy got on the stage and threw a fit because he couldn't hear through his thing. J. Cole didn't do that either. J. Cole couldn't hear. He didn't have a mic. He didn't have an earpiece in for like two songs.
Honestly, I'm literally just playing devil's advocate to kind of like further discussion because I think listeners, part of what I think could hurt a festival performance or hurt an artist, I think this is a platform where he's coming from Nigeria. And you're trying to expand your fan base and this is like probably one of the first big festivals that he's done that you want to get it right. So being frustrated, totally understand.
Yeah.
So I think it is a justified frustration. Could he have gone on? Sure. But I think that if he was an artist that was 2 or 3 years more into his career, I think he probably would have handled it differently and would have tried to work through it. Or if he didn't, I mean, I think he has the grace to be able to kind of go about it that way.
Again, to your point, like you just said, this was his intro. This was a huge introduction
Right.
to a lot of people who did not know who he was. So as a person who knows a few of the songs because I've heard it played, but I didn't know who he is per se. So that's my first true impression of him. This is why I say he handled it badly, because that's my impression of you. I'm not negating the facts. I know why he did it and I understand. I feel bad because that sucks for this to be your main thing. I'm not he did for what he could have done, he did an okay job for trying to get through it.
Mhm.
But toward the end, and his frustrations clearly got the best of him. Could he have, like you said, when he is he more seasoned? Could he have handled it a little bit better? He could have joked about like I just feel like there was a way he could have handled it without to me looking like you just got upset and walked off the stage. Like I know that's not what happened, and he said what was occurring. So I appreciated like him explaining. But at the same time, I just was like, this is my first impression of you. For real, for real. And this is what happened. Like, and none of it is your fault. But this is how you chose to handle it.
I understand. And again, like I said, I'm just playing devil's advocate to kind of like give it fuller like perspective for the listeners. So I know we had that kind of discussion, but I'll also say that Sunday night, the one probably one of the biggest knocks that had nothing to do with like J. Cole and the whole Mike Delete later 7 minute drill debacle or fiasco, whatever word you want to use, was that as we got into later in the evening, as sometimes with artists do, people start to run behind. I will say a big draw for this year was, and if you didn't know, was Nicki Minaj for her fans, which are very lively, as I'll try to be polite about it. Shout out to Teacher Bay. But one of the things that you could definitely tell from versus Saturday to Sunday that a lot of the fans who were really coming to the festival, you could tell by their attire that they're very much there for Nikki. So I've already kind of alluded to it, but one of the things that this is one of those trade-off times where me, culture scientist, and Nurse Joy trade off who was going to chill where. I stayed back because I wasn't necessarily pressed to go see Nicki Minaj. Yes, I have respect for her and her like career, but it wasn't something that I felt like I wanted to go see. And at that point, I was just ready to see J. Cole because we had such a delay in between artists. So, do you want to speak to it or do you want me?
All I know is Nikki was supposed to go on at one time, and I was over there for the entire time. And then when I got back over for J. Cole, Nikki was going on, and it was a whole hour late. So as a person who wanted to see Nikki, personally, I was a little bit annoyed.
So I think that that was a big part of it, that it would be different if there was some type of notification. One of the biggest challenges with festivals, which I'm sure they have certain things they can and can't like actually come on the mic or on stage and kind of put out there, is that if an artist is running behind, one of the biggest things that we would love as festival goers, and I think this isn't just to Dreamville, but in general, is that hey, if this is going on, give us some type of like heads up. Or I think one thing we said with some of the artists, like, hey, can you perform like have show the performances on the other stage?
And that's actually my main request. Like I'm grateful for Monster and everything,
Mhm.
but in between, like some like still play it. At least let us see it. Like that's how I feel, or something.
Yeah, I think, and I know we talked about it, so I won't get into too much of it, but I think part of it was like with the alternating stages and the transitions and the setups, I think that they've kind of figured out what works for them, where like they need that transition time to reset up the stage because as the performers went further into the evening on both nights, there was more stuff they needed set up for like kind of like the performance. Like 50's stage setup was like a lot.
I agree. How they have like the big screen in front of the Rise stage. My question is, can they put another screen or on the screens that are doing the advertisements, right? On
Mm,
one of the screens, can they put it on there? That's it, not the main screen,
No,
the side
no,
screen.
I understand where you're coming from. I think part of what it is too, and I wouldn't be surprised if they do that this next year, is to have that was that for the first couple of years, they didn't really have those side panel like screens. It was just like banners that said like Dreamville Fest or Rise Stage. Outside of that, one of the things I did notice was that the setup was just different. So it was like, okay, cool. So it kind of added to the performances, made it very a lot easier to visually see stuff. But the only time I've ever remembered them possibly showing something on the opposite screen,
It's the first year.
oh no, I think it was also year two because I think part of what it was so what I would say is that they showed J. Cole's performance on the opposite stage on the end of the second night. So that's the only time I've seen it. That's also maybe the only time I've ever really paid attention to it. But all in all, I think that I would, if I had Knox, I would say some like figure out that like communication piece or giving us some type of way to kind of keep fans or festival goers engaged outside of like different booths. So there's that not. But getting to the main performance or the performance that myself, the coach sciences, and Nurse Joy came for was J. Cole. So we can run through a good part of it, but one of the things I mentioned earlier with like the sound was that it kind of took away from his entrance because he came on the stage performing one of his newer songs, which was I think it's Crocodile Tears from the Mike the Lead later mixtape. And because the sound was not coming out properly from his mic, we heard the audio of the beat, but we didn't hear what he was saying. And it was something that happened maybe off and on for like maybe like the first 20 minutes of his performance, where it was like, eh, like they kept having mic issues where they were like trading off or audio issues. It was one of the things where like if you were not someone who had been there before and had experienced it, or you're someone who had less patience or whatever, you were in the right state of mind, you might have been more bothered by it than some. I will say, even as someone who has been to all the events and experienced it, did I get frustrated after a certain point? Yeah. I will say though, I didn't necessarily hear it from a lot of people that it was bothering them too much, but we also weren't necessarily like right up on people like we had been in previous years. So beyond that, I think it was really dope what he did. He's gone over the last couple of years of the habit of not only just performing some of his songs, but also really making it like a group performance where he'll obviously bring out some of his artists from his label, like Earth Gang and Boz. The one thing I do wish, and I think this is just a product of him becoming a bigger artist, is that I wish Jib was on Sundays more because he used to be on the same day as J. Cole and he was able to perform with the rest of Dreamville for like one of their big songs called Down Bad or Stick. So, but he ends up performing on Saturdays because he's typically on tour during that time.
Maybe I'm just selfish. I just want Cole to perform more.
I mean, I've
And I know it's gonna sound bad. I enjoy the artist, but I want to hear Cole.
well, I mean, I think part of what I think, and I can understand that, and I've heard criticism of that. I think why I like when he brings out other artists is that you can kind of see like his maturation as an artist where for the longest time he was just I'm no features, just me. I want to just keep it just all about me, which I get and I appreciate his work that he's done that. But I think it's also to an earlier point we talked about like the evolution of J. Cole is that in his artistry that he recognized that one of the things that he wanted to accomplish as an artist was to not leave there to be a chance where he he didn't like work with artists that he had the opportunity to or miss on the opportunities that he could have had if he kind of went outside of his comfort zone, which I think almost coincides right around the time where he started doing features. And I think some of his best work has been him as a feature artist for a lot of different songs where he's gotten Grammys off of his features.
Yeah, I mean, I get that. But again, going back to the lineup as a whole, and everybody was mad about the lineup. Once again, I'm glad that I don't go to Dreamville or that we don't go to Dreamville for the lineup. Because if that's what we decided to do, we would be very upset. Because like, I do agree that this year's lineup was not the greatest lineup. It was all right. So
I can see that. So to speak to the artist he actually had brought out, obviously he had a performance with Jeremiah. I forget, oh, gosh, what's the name of that song? But basically, he performed. They even did a callback to a previous concert that J. Cole had where Jeremiah came on stage singing and he gave the like really nigga face. because of performing. So that if you're like really deep cut J. Cole fan, you will recognize that callback, which is really dope. Shout out to Jeremiah because I didn't realize that I hadn't heard from him in a while, but apparently during COVID, and excuse my ignorance, part of the reason why he kind of fell off was he had a serious battle with COVID. Yep. During that time. So seeing him there and seeing him perform and hearing a lot of his song being played and him not actually singing it or changing his voice, I didn't realize until I actually looked up. I was like, oh, that's why. He brought out Lil Durk, which was one of the songs All My Life, which is a really dope song. Brought out his Dreamville artist, like I said. Brought out Lil Yachty, and I think it was really dope. And listeners, I'll be fully transparent. I had been on the fence about Lil Yachty for a while because he used to be, in my mind, one of those like mumble rappers that I was like, I really don't bang with him. He has his audience, but it's cool, but not necessarily for me. But he's starting to grow on me, and maybe it's because of the J. Cole co-sign, but I'll never say that I'm like a deep Lil Yachty fan, but I have more respect for him as an artist. So you have him. Um, let's see. There's one more that I'm missing. It was oh no, I'm sorry, it was just Lil Yachty. Honestly, listeners, because he had been on yeah, I said Lil Durk.
Oh, just making sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I would say one of the things I will say that I thought was going to happen, but it's kind of almost like not expecting too much, but it's like they don't really repeat it. Was the I thought Drake was going to come out. For listeners, you know that Drake and him have been on a tour for quite some time. So I thought that part of it was going to be where he Drake would come out and they may perform. But if you listen to part one of this discussion, you know that there's like the diss and all that stuff going on. So I think maybe it was one of the things where Drake was like, I'm probably not going to come. And there's some social media people that have kind of talked about like, oh, what did Drake say and all that. But that's not what this episode's about. We'll probably end up getting into it probably in a future episode. But yeah, from there, basically, he got into what a lot of people have talked about. On social media, even like after the first part of this discussion happened, where J. Cole took time out before he got into like his last few songs to talk about the apology. And what he did was really just kind of address the whole thing and kind of explain like how he felt like it was kind of lame. And I will tell you that as someone who listened to it in person, I talked about this a little bit more during the first piece of this discussion that it definitely felt very genuine and he felt very much like no, I genuinely didn't sit right with the spirit. And I think as a man, you be able to kind of acknowledge like, hey, this didn't sit right with me. I'm going to address this and I want to make sure that it's very clear that hey, if Kendrick came back with a diss towards him, he take it on the chin and kind of move forward because he didn't want to put his inner peace at risk. So I know me and Mr. Smith discussed it, but culture scientists, what were your thoughts on the apology?
I thought it was genuine. I personally think he should have just never did a diss, in my personal opinion. As a person who likes both J. Cole and K. Dot,
Mhm.
I was over it from the beginning, so I was appreciative of the apology. I think people are making it a way bigger deal than it needs to be.
Mhm.
Again, though, I am not as deep of a music head as other people and people that are into rap. Some people wanted a rap battle, and a like actual rap battle.
Mhm.
And they're like, oh, okay, that got in his head. I don't think that's what occurred,
Mhm.
from the arguments, but I see why people keep using it.
Mhm.
And I think he, like you said, there's a difference of trying to protect your peace. And yeah, if he wants to do, there isn't, yes, everyone's like protecting your peace and having a battle. It's not like he was gonna be hurt or anything. For him, it could have been the equivalent.
Mhm.
And just because he decided to step down, to me, him apologizing after doing the diss, deleting the diss, doing the diss, apologizing,
Mhm.
still saying you can still come at me, and deleting it. To me, everyone's like, "Oh, he took an L."
If you
He
want to see it like that, I mean,
see
go
it more
ahead.
as a win, really,
I'll turn.
because now if K Dot comes back who's he really coming back at?
Mm.
Like there's nobody in this battle except for him. And then I love K Dot, but I feel like they would make him look bad. So at the same time, I just feel like, why are we doing this? When the real problem is Drake.
Yeah, and when listeners, we're not gonna get into the Drake disc and the
About
response
to
on
get
it.
on Karen and have
I'm about to
about it.
say that is a discussion for probably me and Mr. Smith another time.
Yeah.
So it's just one of the things where I think if obviously people are just doing it a lot of it for clicks and it was just a hot topic, but I will say as I'm very much we're farther removed from the actual apology and the fallout from it, I will say that it's one of those things where it will probably be looked at more. It is only seen in a negative light to certain people who have already had an opinion about J. Cole. There are people who have a feeling about any of these artists that are going on with all this. Whatever happened was not going to change where people stood before the beef or after the beef. Go ahead.
Well, the point, which is what I've been looking at. The main argument was that he constantly saying that he's the best. And then when it was time for him to like battle, he chose not to battle. And from the teachings of the Lord, you don't always have to show off
Mhm.
to say why you're the best.
I think,
Just, to
and
the
I,
thought.
I would agree with that. I think, and I know I talked about it in the other episode, but I think part of what it is that I think I would have probably been fine if it was a stronger like
This
if it was
it wasn't
I don't
even
even
the
know say
greatest
I
diss.
don't know if it was like I don't know if stronger is the word I'm looking for. I think a more cohesive and more like probably like thought out.
Because he came for the fans. That's how I feel. I feel like Cole came for the fans. He did it on accident, but he came for the fans.
Eh,
And I'm just like,
yeah, I think
it
part of it
wasn't his best track. I mean,
like
it was fire.
I think that it was one of the things that I think he talked about. It was like almost in a sense half baked. Like
Yeah.
it could have been better. So with that being said, he ends up continuing to perform. He's doing this thing. Performs two of his favorite songs. He always does the last two songs. He always does every festival, and you know the festival's over when he does each song. He does "Love Yours,"
Yeah.
which is he said on multiple times that's his favorite record, and it's one of the things that I didn't like. I had a great appreciation for it, but when I really started thinking about it and how life has been lifing lately, I have definitely grown to love it even more. Still in my top five. But of course, he had to finish with No Role Models. It's probably like one of his, it's like top three, one of his biggest songs of all time. That and Neighbors is probably up there, like top three for him.
Some of my favorite songs.
So so that's performances going on. The last nitpick about the festival before we kind of wrap things up was the transition from leaving. It is never easy, the Sunday transition to leave because unlike in previous times, you have people who will leave early because maybe they may not like the headliner or people are trying to get home because they want to rest up for the second day. The second day is harder to leave because everybody's staying for J. Cole, or at least it felt like it. So it was one of those things where it's like everybody's leaving. It's crowded getting through the gates because everybody, well, not everybody, but a decent amount of people are all leaving through the west gate where there's a lot of check-in and it's like a very narrow area. Yeah, for the shuttles and for people who are on the parking deck, things like that. So with that, as we're trying to get there, we're making decent enough time. The part that became probably the most frustrating for everybody was that when we got to where the shuttles pick up, people were being people,
Ignorant.
people were being people, and people were trying to do what people do on the highway where they try to merge in last minute or try to drive up further to get in front of people and people aren't going to let them in.
I'm
And
just saying. I'm sorry. I'm just saying. If you cross the street and you see a horde of people standing there, why would you say, "Oh, I'm gonna just go to the front and then try to cut the horde of people,"
because they see other people trying to do it, so it's like they can't get all of us type of mentality. So
which they made it worse for everybody else?
yeah, which came to the point where there were people who were trying to work the gates as best they could, at least in my opinion. And they're saying, like, hey, if you are trying to cut the line, you will not get on the shuttle. And if you do not have a wristband, which was another big part where people were trying, I'm sure there's quite a few people who were just trying to get on the shuttles because they didn't want to have to try to get an Uber or walk back to their vehicles, which were downtown. So they were trying to sneak onto the shuttles and not have to pay the money for the shuttle, which they might have gotten away with Saturday night because it probably wasn't as big of a deal. But they knew that there was a lot of people on Sunday who were leaving who had paid for the shuttles. So it was just one of those things. So that was probably the last difficult thing about the night. Once we got on the actual shuttle and got back, the ride was smooth. We got back home at a decent time. And shout out to the culture scientists who idea was for us to set up a relaxing day on Monday after the fact. We, in the last couple of years, have taken the Monday after Dreamville Fest off. So we took time to kind of unwind, got do a little self-care, which was enjoyable. Um, to bring the to bring our discussion to a close, I want to give a couple of highlights. Shout out to, I believe it is Culture NC who did a article about the event. Couple of things that they kind of highlighted that, like I said earlier, there were over 104,000 people attending over the weekend. Um, they said that it was really dope, as well as talked about the family atmosphere. Um, they also brought up that the event actually brought into the city of Raleigh, from the economic impact report, that there was $145.9 million that are brought into the area based off of the festival, which is really dope. Yes.
Something I've noticed that people keep for the articles, I'm reading the comments on the articles of these ones,
Mhm.
and it's just something to talk about maybe moving forward. But one of the arguments is that they complain that he doesn't have it in Fayetteville. And like the main part that I've taken and the educational part that I understood is that the in from his takeaway of saying, I don't know how many more I got in me, is the infrastructure that
Mhm.
it takes to
Yeah,
put on something like this.
agreed, agreed.
And like as much as I agree, like I'm grateful that it's in Raleigh because it's closer to us. Will we go down to Fayetteville? Probably. However, I feel bad because yes, that's where he's from. Yes, I feel that if he could, he should put it on there. But like the comments was like, there's no place that was gonna hold 52,000 people.
Yeah.
Or if they do, it's gonna be more complicated. That's a military town.
Yep.
There's schools. There's like a million different
Logistics of
reasons.
travel alone would probably be one of the biggest barriers.
Hotel wise.
Hotel wise and people transport and like you said, infrastructure. I think
Yeah.
that's a big part.
So to that point though, the way I don't know how it would work, but the way like to make sure I feel that probably he does hire Fayetteville owned businesses to do things. But of course he uses a lot of the things. So the question that
Mhm.
again, you probably don't have the answer and we don't have the answer, but how much of that actually goes to the entire state of North Carolina and not just Raleigh? That's the question that
That
everybody
is,
keeps
I
asking about.
think I think that would be that is a question to kind of delve into that, and I think that one of the things I remember reading about in one of the Facebook groups that I found interesting is that from its inception, it used to be stuff that was like figured out and done within the state, but there's a company I think is out in Houston that helps like out like deal with like the ticket side of things and some of the logistics of planning the festival. So I'm not saying to your point, uh, front cake, yes. I want to say it's front cake. So they have been working over the last 2, 3 years with the festival, and I think they kind of outsourced some of it. So I think the increase into the multiple days, as well as some of the stuff that the changes that have come in place, some of them for the most part have been good. Some of them were like, you kind of wish they were a little bit different, but you understand that it takes a lot, that I think it comes with a lot of growth of the festival. So I mean, I think that plays a big part. Do I think that he could in the future, maybe not even necessarily a Dreamville Fest, but some type of last hurrah in Fayetteville? Do I think that he'll probably do that? It would seem in his character to do that.
Yeah. Just for his city.
Yeah, and I think that's what he does. He's not one that has avoided his hometown. Like hell, he had a setup. He had the car that he used to drive around from when he lived in Fayetteville um at the event. So I think overall, if I were to grade my experience, and I'll get you a grade as well, I would say that year 4 was cool. I enjoyed it. I always have a good time, but I will say that if I were to rank them, um, one is always going to be top for me. I'm going to have to say year three, and then year two, and then year four. But that is not an indication that this was a bad year. It's just that nothing tops the first experience of having a festival in the area that you've been living in almost 10 years now. Year three, I'm going to give it to, just off of Usher's performance on Saturday alone was worth everything for year three. Year two is really dope because I it was the first time they did it over multiple days and it was just a new experience for me. And then this year, it was just solid. It was solid. Everything else was like spectacular. This year was kind of solid. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, J. Cole said he doesn't know how many more Dreamville Fest he has in him. I think that's a very real thing because it's like, I don't know, man. It becoming bigger than what it may have been originally intended, and it's kind of becoming more generic and less of a, oh, this is something like special to the Triangle area or to North Carolina. So I would say overall, I would say
See,
three and
I
a half out of
disagree
five.
with that assessment. I still feel like
Really?
it's special to North Carolina. Yes, has it gotten a lot more? It's still very much Dreamer. It's still very much J. Cole. It's still very much Dreamville. So on that assessment, I have to disagree. However, in my order, I'm not gonna lie. I mean, I'm gonna say first year was the greatest year because it's the one, because it's the first year. I honestly don't remember the first year as much as I probably should.
I wonder why.
But it was a great. What I do remember it was great.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, I'm gonna rank it based off of just I know that the first year was great. That's gonna be number one.
Okay.
Last year would be number two because I missed it, and then this year, or the second year,
Okay.
and then I'm gonna say last year is number two for me. This year will be number three.
Okay. On a scale from like 1 to 5, what would you put it?
For this year,
Yeah.
solid eight.
I said 1 to 5.
No, solid 3.5.
Okay. Cool. Well, listeners, we've kind of gone on into this probably as much as I think that we're probably going to get out of this topic, but we have definitely enjoyed our time with Dreamville. Thank you for listening to our discussion between myself and the culture scientist.
Also, it's funny because we definitely said we're probably not gonna go. This probably be our last year. We're probably gonna take a break. I doubt it.
Yes, unless certain life situations change, there is a high likelihood we'll still go again. But I think that as we kind of continue to grow and kind of look at things, we are not as going to be as in much of a rush as we have in
Yeah.
past years to get tickets. If we go, it's one of the things that we'll get it, but we're not going to be as pressed, which isn't an indication of like how much we enjoyed it. It's just
The timing of our lives.
timing of life. We're getting older, just like J. Cole. Man's 39, about to be 40 soon. So it's one of the things where he's like, okay, we'll kind of take it with a little bit more reflection on things. So thank you for listening to our discussion this week. If you want to check us out, you can always hit us up on our social medias at, give me 1 second, I gotta pull it up. Usually we thank Mr. Smith for this. Basically, you can always check us out on our social media at the TNT Pod 123 on Twitter, Truth and Transparency Pod on Instagram, Truth and Transparency Pod on TikTok, the Truth and Transparency Podcast on Facebook, the Truth and Transparency Podcast on YouTube. And you can always email us your thoughts, opinions, or any feedback you might have heard from the festival that we missed and you can email us at truthandtransparencypod123@gmail.com for the culture scientists and for myself. For all of our listeners and supporters, if this podcast gets no bigger than what it is right now, they are forever grateful. We are forever grateful. And the immortal words of my father, eat the elephant one bite at a time. Peace.